Google have just released the November core update, but despite it feeling like they've released several of these updates this year, I feel like we've never been in a better position than we are today to firstly understand what Google are looking for when they release a core update, and two, specifically what to do to actually rank in the top 3 for a given keyword. Now, we have clients making millions in pipeline from SEO every single year in some of the most competitive categories, including software, finance, insurance, law. And the reason they're able to do this is because we meticulously follow the data and we do the things that work. Now, we actually changed our approach ever so slightly in the summer because, of course, we had the data leak that became public 4 or 5 months ago, coupled with the fact that Google, I feel anyway, do leave specific breadcrumbs in their documentation related to this word helpful and the word reliable. 2 words that they've constantly been pushing in tweets, in sort of messaging from spokespeople across probably the last 18 months. And now I feel like we're in a position where we can actively define what they mean by those 2 things. This morning, I actually wrapped up this specific hypothesis into a LinkedIn status. And what I'm going to do is pretty much run through what that hypothesis is and essentially detail what we say to our clients to do whenever we have a small update, a core update, whatever it may be. And subsequently, this has allowed them to either hold or gain in these competitive industries as well. But what I'm firstly going to do is just start on the official documentation because Google does give some useful points to follow, but the problem is that it generally is quite vague and it lacks much specificity, which is what we need when we're trying to rank, right? So I'm going to come back to helpful and reliable in just a minute and go through some of the key things that they tell us to look for. There's 4 things outlined here. The first one is wait until the update has rolled out. Completely agree with that. Specifically, if you're looking to do site-wide changes such as domain migrations, just wait until the core update has finished so that if there's any issues with the migration, you can confidently rule out it's not because of an update and a reclassification of your site. The second part is when you compare the data, check the dates are comparative. Point number 3, review your top pages and queries. So if you've experienced a drop from first page to the third page, this is where you might need to interrogate that page and the SERP a little bit more. It might be that actually you've done nothing wrong, but the intent of the keyword has changed from something that's more informational led to maybe something that's more service page led, for example. And Google sort of outlines this down here. Now, they do also give us a self-assessment questionnaire. So sort of questions to ask yourself if your content has dropped off for a certain keyword. Now, the problem with this is, again, there's a lot of subjectivity within it. And although it says to sort of try and be as objective as possible, that can be a bit of a challenge, right? So although I wouldn't necessarily say completely rule this out, just bear in mind that this is very much one side of the coin, like the sort of content quality side of it. And even if you would say that you tick all these boxes, it doesn't guarantee by any stretch of the imagination that you will recover those specific rankings. So I would just bear that in mind when going through this. The sort of final point it also says here is deleting content is a last resort. I think it's always good to, ironically try and be honest with your content. I've seen examples in the past where a website will write pretty much about anything. So, if they look after an accountancy practice, they had been writing content around sort of things like fox hunting. It just doesn't make any sense. It just dilutes Google's understanding of your business and your domain as an entity. You want to keep that pretty tight so Google understands what you are an expert in and what you write about. So from a high level, that's what Google talks about. Now, what I'm going to do is just sort of break down a bit more of a hypothesis as to what Google has been and will continue to look for with each update. And I mentioned here that they continue to use the phrase helpful and the phrase reliable. Before I break down how I believe Google defines what helpful content is and what reliable content is, and subsequently how we can use it to improve our rankings, If you enjoy this type of content, if you like these videos, then please subscribe to the channel. One of the most notable takeaways that I took from this data leak was that Google does in fact use Chrome data to assess user signals, engagement signals from when someone puts in a keyword into Google search, and then essentially everything that they do from that point. And this sort of realization that actually click data is really important. So some of the things that they spoke about was using clickstream data and putting this clickstream data into the likes of a NavBoost system, into a Glue system, looking at short versus long clicks, for example. And the spirit of this was to paint a picture of whether content is helpful, useful, and reliable. And of course, there are other factors that play into ranking as well. But where I think this is most important is obviously when a link is on page one, when links are actually generating clicks, Google needs a system to understand, well, which content is actually serving the user in the best way against the target keyword, because Google fundamentally does not know whether content is great content or good content. So it uses these engagement signals as a measure of that success. The simplest way that I understand it and can explain it is if your car broke down and you're on the side of the road, you called the mechanic turns up, you want the mechanic to diagnose the problem, show you how the problem can be fixed, and probably give you a cost to do that. If they can then do it on the side of the road, even better. The mechanic has turned up, given you the information that you need, you've made a decision, they've then resolved the problem by fixing, you can be on your way. If the mechanic turned up and they gave you information about the car, they told you about the history of problems with the car, for example, but they didn't know how to fix the car, diagnose the issues, you're not going to be very happy. Alternatively, if they gave you maybe a history of the car, if they gave you a history of issues with that specific model, and then after 30 minutes, maybe they gave you that diagnosis, you would be happy that they got to that point, but frustrated that it took them so long, right? And Google essentially works the same way. So if I type in, for example, best performance management software, and I click on a link, and the link gives me definitions about performance management software, it tells me what is performance management software, then gives me examples of performance management software, I'm not going to be happy. I just want a list of the best, quote unquote, performance management software. Now, of course, within that, me searching performance management software versus someone else searching performance management software, we could be looking for two different solutions. So the page content has to direct me based on specifically what I'm looking for. Because if I'm in law, for example, I might be looking at a different performance management software tool compared to if I was in finance. So the content might sort of point me to say, if you're looking for a finance solution within performance management, check out this list, or in law, check out this list, for example. So what content should be doing is essentially trying to serve the user's query, the user's need, as early as possible. And that's essentially what Google would define as helpful. Now, going back up the pyramid a little bit, something I mentioned previously before, Google uses these engagement signals to understand whether that content is essentially serving the purpose for that keyword. So in short, how does Google identify what helpful content is? It uses user data. So this is highly likely to be only prominent when you're on that first page. Really think about what the user, or what you want the user to do when they land on that page. Now, when it comes to reliability, the one thing we need to think about is the Google Reddit acquisition. Now, the Reddit model has always worked because the answers given to set questions are community driven. So the best responses are given the upvotes. Those responses are listed directly underneath the question. So you've got both sides of the coin there. You've got a specific question that another user may have, not just a keyword that me and 3 other people could be searching but wanting different answers. Actually, you've got a specific question that removes any ambiguity. But then you've also got a crowdsourced answer underneath it that the community say, this is the best answer for this query. Now, those two things mean that if the user is searching for that specific question or has that specific question, the engagement signals are going to be extremely positive from a Google point of view. You know, the short versus long click, the clickstream data, you know, all the click data and user signals that Google collect through Chrome and put into the likes of NavBoost and Glue are going to be infinitely positive. So although we've seen a rise in the Reddit appearing in top spots for certain queries, and yes, of course, it won't be a coincidence that Google have acquired it, but additionally, the engagement signals are going to be really positive for those reasons. So how can we now take this and turn it into something actionable that we can use to rank our site with, right? And some of the things that I've put down here are sort of two-pronged. So obviously, typical domains and websites don't operate like a forum or a Reddit forum. So we have to build reliability in other ways. So this is things like trying to improve our brand search. So again, if we have more people searching our brand, it shows that there's more awareness of us as a solution. Highly likely we're going to be more trusted as a solution as well. Brand mentions as well, if we're getting mentions in press and third parties, especially if they're sort of more established as well. New York Times, for example, that's going to be positive signals. In the same breath, reputable third-party links, business citations, do we appear on Crunchbase? You know, all these signals that sit outside of our site that are driven by third parties are going to help build the case for us being reliable as a source. And then going back up to the first query, how can we also ensure that we are helpful in our content? So things like summarizing the key points of the page at the start of the page, directing users to parts of the page with specific answers, internally linking to relevant other pages where it's necessary, and finally ensuring content is readable. So removing things like block text, having single sentence paragraphs and various sort of other things like that. We've put this into a checklist. We've broadened out our briefs to be sort of 9 or 10 pages. Now, whenever we go and optimize and create content for clients, and again, this is why our clients have seen consistent results that tend to improve year on year in some of the most competitive SERPs as well. So I'm interested to hear your comments on the core update. I did take a look at any sort of fluctuations across the countries. There isn't anything too crazy at the moment, according to Systrix. This is, do I have anything in the US? In the USA, a little bit more volatility in the USA, but very little in the UK at the moment. So I'm going to keep a bit of an eye on this as well. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you've seen anything. Otherwise, please subscribe to the channel and I will see you on the next video. Thank you.